path called mystery, Like God does things in our lives that we don't really understand, or we don't know how he did it, but he just does it, right? And he works directly in our lives. And us as Christians, we have this faith and this experience that, wow, God did something. That was God, or thank God for that, right? So just to give you some examples of that is God works in ways we do not understand. He is the one who ultimately gives the increase, and we see that in 1 Corinthians 3:7. We said, Paul planted, Apollos watered, but God gives the increase, right? And so we know that God is the one who ultimately gives the grace for a specific change. And we have to build our faith in his love, grace, and care for each person and his care, because the very hairs of your head are numbered, right? Like the very hairs of your head are numbered. That means that God cares about every detail in your life. God knows about it, and nothing happens in your life without him knowing, and he works directly in your life. In addition to this path, God also works through others. God works through others. And we see in 2 Corinthians 6:1, it says that we are workers together with him. Like so we as his people work with him in doing his work, right? So even though he does it directly through mystery, there's also another path that he works through, which is through his people. God strengthens the body of Christ by making it a resource for itself. The body is a resource for itself. And within the others path, there are professionals where each person has skills and gifts, and there's the community where God uses the community to support us. I want to give you just what the Bible says about this quickly, because I don't want you to lose these points, because what we're going to get to is really the through others point, but I don't want you to miss this whole structure that's happening, because this is the full picture of how God works in our lives. In mystery, it says, but as it is written, eye has not seen, nor ear heard, nor have entered into the heart of man the things which God prepared for those who love him. Like there are things that we don't understand, we've never seen before. There's all this stuff that our ears have never heard before that God has prepared for us, right? Not just in eternity, but also in life now, because eternity begins now. In Proverbs chapter 20, it says, a man's steps are of the Lord. How then can a man understand his own way? And what that means is that sometimes in my own life, I am engaged in things that I don't understand. And this includes good things and bad things, right? So I don't understand my own way completely. And also, Jesus said to the disciples, he said, what I am doing you do not understand now, but you will know after this. So God is doing things now that we don't understand. When it comes to professionals, we see in this beautiful book called The Wisdom of Sirach, it's one of the books of the Bible, it says, and he gave skill to men that he might be glorified in his wonders. And another later he says, and keep in touch with your physician. That's a doctor, right? Keep in touch with your physician, for the Lord created him, and do not let him leave you, for you need him. And this is in the Bible. So in other words, God is pointing us to the resources that he's given us through professionals. And we also know in the book of Exodus, there was a man named Bezalel, the son of Uri, with wisdom and understanding to be able to design the tabernacle, to do all these beautiful works. And it was a specific person with a specific set of skills and talents and gifts. A professional, there's a professional who is there to do stuff for God's work, right? Also, aside from professionals, we have the community itself, which all of us fit into the community, and some of us fit into the professionals, right? But all of us fit into the community. The centurion whose servant was sick sent friends to Jesus. Those friends are the community, right? He sent friends to Jesus and said, hey, those friends were not experts or professionals. They had a job. Their job was to go get Jesus and make that connection. Right? That's what we all do. Another very popular example is the four friends who brought their fifth friend through the roof. It was because he was paralyzed. They brought him to the roof. That I think you can do, and I'm giving it to you, so you could do it. Okay, so like I want you to be, like wannabe counselors. But you're not counselors. You're just wannabe counselors. Okay, I want you to be good at this. Okay, and you can do it. Okay. This is all about sophisticating your thinking and learning some skills and having a new and a broader and a better perspective. And we're going to talk about that for the rest of the evening. So the first thing you should do is know this. Something is always going on with the other person. Something is always going on with the other person. You just need to look. You just need to look. So don't oversimplify, and don't be naive, and don't be overgeneralize or be too hopeful or wishful in your thinking. Your starting point should always be that there is something going on with the person I'm talking to. It doesn't necessarily mean that they need to have like a full blown out conversation, but there is something going on. Every person has pain. Every person is going through losses, especially now, right? We're going through losses, and we have gains too. We're losing things and we're gaining things. And these losses require a grieving process. These losses are not easy. These losses are things that everyone is going through. I'm going through them. We're all going through them. Stresses and challenges and changes come and go. Even if you're not dealing with anything right now, you will later, right? Others who are dealing with something are likely affecting you. And what I mean by that is that if someone is bothering you, that's probably the best target or candidate for, oh, there's something going on with them and they need help. And just that's like a really easy indicator. If someone is bothering you, they're probably going through something. You may currently be called by God to support someone who needs something. So that's why you need to look for something, right? You need to look and be aware. In the present time, you may be the only person that someone is willing to talk to because of your relationship with them, or because of your reputation. Maybe you have a reputation where they just see you as a warm person or a nice person, or they just have a good history with you, or you're the only person they have history with. So sometimes you might be the only person that someone is willing to talk to at this time. And you may be the determinant, or that conversation with you, or that encounter with you may be what determines whether or not they're going to get more advanced help. So you can see that even if you can't do something, you might be what determines whether or not something is going to happen in the future to help that person. Lastly, a good example or something that affects why we need to look is time, because people change over time and people have different needs over time. Maybe someone is doing okay right now, but over time they're becoming less and less okay because things are changing. Things can become more or less severe, and you have to decide whether or not someone needs a check-in or a follow-up. I know some people who can have expressed their disappointment that someone didn't follow up with them after they had a conversation about something, a challenge they were facing. So think about that. Can I follow up with someone on a conversation they had with me in the past and see how they're doing? Are they doing okay? Your starting assumption should always be that something is going on. Now I want you to sophisticate your thinking. Meaning, I want you to be sophisticated. I don't mean sophisticated in like a, raise your socioeconomic class or act as if you, are better than other people. I mean, sophisticate, make it more complex. I want you to de-simplify your thinking. I want you to make your thinking complicated, okay? And make it more sophisticated. And I want you to look at dimensions. Look at dimensions, okay? Because a person is not just some appearance, right? A person is not just a box on a Zoom screen, right? There's a lot going on, okay? So think about body, spirit, culture, social environment, family, and soul and mind. And if I was gonna really make this diagram the way I should make it, I was going to draw arrows between every circle, like there would be arrows in all directions going in this diagram. They'd be everywhere, okay? Because all these things affect all these things, okay? All these things affect all these things. And in each of these things, there are things that you can control and things you can't control. There are things you can control and there's things you can't control. And now let's talk about them. These are just a few considerations, but there's many more. In your body, there are health problems, there's brain chemistry, there's fatigue, there's drugs and medications, there's diet. There's so many things, and I think it's clear to everyone. In some of these things you have control, and in some of these things you don't have control. In your soul or in your mind, there's negative thought patterns that people have. They think, they have, sometimes they get caught in a bad cycle of thinking, and they have negative thoughts. And those thoughts can really lead them down into a really sad place, or they can be really down. There's myths and false beliefs. And this is really frustrating, because especially as someone who is trying to help people, when you see that they believe something that doesn't make any sense, right? You can't just tell them, hey, that doesn't make any sense. You can't do that, especially during COVID times, right? I was just giving a talk the hour before this to a different group, and we were talking about how different people have different perspectives on the same exact pieces of information. Everyone, we all have a lot of the same news, the same data, but we're interpreting it differently. We're coming to different conclusions, different decisions, different behaviors, different beliefs, right? And this is really tough. There are biases, and also people have been through trauma or have anxiety. And these are things that affect how people think and what is going on in their minds. With your spirit, and with everyone's spirit, there's sin, there's temptation, there's disconnection from God, there's spiritual inertia. Inertia just means the force that's keeping you from moving, the force that's keeping you from moving. And there is that in your spiritual life that you're not going anywhere, right? And that's difficult. Also, similar to myths and false beliefs, there's false theology. There's misconceptions or bad or inaccurate understandings about how God works, who God is, and those things affect how we connect with God and how we see who we are and how we understand how God cares for us. With our families, there's lots of generational patterns. There's unspoken rules. There's poor modeling. Most of us in our relationships are repeating what happened in our parents, in our homes, in our families of origin. And that's bad when there were bad models. They didn't show us how to speak with each other. They didn't show us how to handle a conflict. They didn't show us how to express affection. They didn't show us how to go to God when there's a problem. They didn't show us a lot of things. Also, there's expectations from our families and lots of boundary violations. And what that means is families not letting you leave emotionally or physically or anything like that. And that's really tough. In our culture, there's a stigma of dealing with mental health, and that's very important, because I just actually wrote a blog post about what makes it hard for men to seek therapy. What makes it hard for men to seek therapy? And because it's a known fact among mental health professionals or mental health professionals that most clients are women, most mental health professionals are women, and there's a lot driving that. And so there's a stigma around mental health in general, and then there's another stigma around men getting mental health support, right? And this is sad. It's so sad, because I can tell you from my own personal experience, even just as part of my my training, I was required to get therapy for 15 sessions. I was required to do 15 sessions. That was like the minimum I had to do. And I met that requirement. And then I was like, this is so great. I'm going to do so many more. I ended up doing like 40 something sessions for my own therapy. And I grew so much during that time. And I'm so sad to see anybody missing out on this humongous opportunity to grow. It's a humongous opportunity to grow. And you saw the list that I just showed you of the things that a professional Christian counselor can do with you. Ain't nobody else going to do that work with you. Even a priest knows that they can't spend all those sessions with you, even if they're trained in doing it. They can't spend all that time doing that work, right? So the stigma is really making us miss out on a lot of good things. There's also expectations from culture, like when you should get married, how you should be, how you should show emotion, blah, 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 all that stuff. And then there's rigid rules. And then in your social environment, there's the availability of healthy friends. It's good to have friends, and especially during COVID times, we should have lots of friends and connect with people, and we should take any acquaintance and see if there's an opportunity to be closer. But at the same time, not all friends are healthy. Not all friends are helpful. Some friends are invalidating. Some friends don't encourage you to go to God. Some friends don't encourage you to do good things. And that's That's sad. And then there's a willingness to deal with vulnerability. You know, I'm going to just say this, but sometimes we don't do a good job of encouraging each other to be vulnerable. And I don't know what the culture is like in Canada, but I know on many parts of the U.S., if guys are talking to each other and one of the guys says his emotion, someone's gonna say, "Aye, bro, that's gay. Don't say that." Like, or they'll make fun of the guy for sharing their emotion, right? And there's lots of versions of that among women too, and just kind of maybe gossiping, or maybe like there's just so much nastiness that we all have towards each other, and we need to allow ourselves and give ourselves the space and the permission to be vulnerable. So there are many factors at play to interfere with your emotional health, and I'm structuring this talk in terms of you being being more emotionally healthy, and then how to support others. But the first step begins with you. But there are many factors at play that interfere with your emotional health. And those factors are things that are in you and things that are coming from everyone else. But the point, this slide here is showing you the factors that interfere with your personal emotional health. Everything on the slide is affecting your emotional health, okay? What is coming from you? You can't always believe or trust your mind or your heart. Just because you feel it doesn't mean it's right. Sometimes you're afraid or anxious, but it doesn't mean what you're saying, that what you're feeling is right, or your thoughts are accurate, or your thoughts are complete. When you are hurt, you want to avoid further vulnerability, which works against your seeking support. And that's so sad, because sometimes when we're hurt, we enter into this fight, flight, or freeze response, and we avoid being more vulnerable through getting help, because we're like, wait, I'm hurt, so I don't want to be vulnerable. But you need to be vulnerable to get help, right? It's kind of like the person who's sick and they don't want to go to the doctor because they're afraid of what the doctor's going to tell them. But you need to go to the doctor because you need help, right? And I mean that not just going to the doctor, but going to each other. Change and grief create very similar emotional processes. So, and these are very difficult things when you're going through changes or you're grieving something. You're in a difficult emotional process. And sometimes it's hard to justify emotional work because you don't see the effects immediately. And that's important. Like, why should I talk about something that's difficult? Why should I get help? And usually, and I always love to say this to any client, that it took you 10, 20, 30 years to get here. It's not going to go away in 2 sessions or 3 sessions. And I always like to remind the client that sometimes it's going to get worse before it gets better, because you have to go in order to come out. You have to go and work on it. It's kind of like you had a wound and it got covered up with all this other stuff. And there's like a bullet or something stuck inside. If you need to get that bullet out, you got to open it up and then go and get it out, right? You have to do that work, and it's painful. What are other people doing or things that are coming from other people that interfere with your emotional health? The past is a very useful but often imperfect reference point. Sometimes people refer to the past in order to determine what is acceptable in the present. And what I mean by that is, like, sometimes you were hurt in the past. And so because you were hurt by someone else in the past, in the present or in the future, you have a similar interaction. It looks the same, but it's not coming from someone who's hurtful or harmful to you. It's coming from someone who's good. But you use that past experience as a reference point, an automatic reference point, and you think, oh, because this looks the same, I'm not going, this is bad and it's not good. For example, if in your life right now, someone yells at you, or someone says something to you and it sounds exactly like how your mom used to say something to you, and you never liked that. And then that could trigger a lot of emotions from the past because you have that reference point. And now you're responding with anger, with hatred, with bitterness, even if it's to someone who you know and you trust is very good for you. Also, the past ignores advancements and improvements in life. I want to tell you guys, we can do things now emotionally that we couldn't do in the past with each other. It's kind of like when the wheel was invented, or electricity was discovered and we were able to route it to do certain things for us, right? Now we have things like emotional intelligence. There was nobody talking about that framework years, like decades ago. So it makes sense that in this generation, we're able to talk and do things that prior generations weren't talking and doing. And I always deal with that with older people, like older couples or older families, especially if they're struggling with their kids or their marriage is struggling, that I see that. And they're like, wait, but why didn't my grandparents need to do premarital counseling? Well, the emotional needs at the time were very different, right? And now we have more sophisticated needs. People around us often fail us when it comes to providing support, and that interferes with your emotional health. Sometimes people are not cool, and they really don't help. And sometimes they say very invalidating things, like you tell them, hey, I'm dealing with something. And they're like, bro, I'm going to pray for you. Or they say, God has a purpose for you. And that's all they say. They don't listen, they don't validate, they nothing. Or they say, no, that's not a big deal. Or why are you making a big deal out of nothing? Or many people have been through that before. It's going to be okay. But these things may not be helpful. And sometimes people are actually say hurtful things. And also you may be changing, but the dynamics around you are still adjusting to the new you. And that's another way that your emotional health can be interfered with. So I just want to summarize these key messages so far. Mental health and emotional health is complex. And a vast majority of the time, it's not caused by sin. It's not a punishment from God, okay? Mental health challenges are not coming from sin, and it's not like God is causing them, okay, most of the time. We cannot separate mental health from spiritual health, social health, and emotional health. We are all relational beings, and that means that our growth involves others. Our recovery involves others. To cope with COVID, for example, involves others. Also, all of us need to be more sensitive to and attuned to what is happening emotionally. There is always something happening emotionally. Every single person, with no exceptions, even me, on this Zoom call is going through something, okay? And every person you know, all of your family, everyone is going through something right now. And you just need to be more attuned to it. You need to listen for it. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Each person is responsible 100% to get help for themselves. So what I'm saying to you, and this asymmetry is really important. I want to just acknowledge this. You are responsible to get help for yourself. At the same time, you help others. So I'm not going to tell you, wait for someone to help you. I'm not going to say that. You help yourself, get help for yourself, and help others. Okay, so that's an asymmetry, right? I'm not telling you to wait for someone to help you. That's not on the table. Okay, so that's off the table. It's not an option. You get help for yourself and help others. That's it. All right. So how can I help in my own community? First is get in touch with yourself, and we're going to talk about that. The more in touch you are with yourself on all dimensions, the more you can support others. So you have to know before you can help others where you are. Where are you? Where are you? And these are 5 questions that you can ask yourself. How much of your life experience is clouding your ability to understand the other's experience? So if you're going to try to help someone, you need to ask yourself where you are. Where am I? How much of my life experience is clouding my ability to understand the other person's experience? Does what this person is experiencing remind you of anything in your life? For example, if you didn't have a good relationship with your father, and the other person is complaining about their father, are you going to interpret what's going on the way you lived in your life and your relationship with your father? That's not right. Don't do that, right? You have to understand what's going on with them. What's their relationship with their father, right? Maybe your father was a really nice person. Maybe your father was not a nice person. Doesn't say anything about their father. It just says that they're having a problem with their father, and you had a problem with your father. Doesn't mean that they're the same thing, right? So you have to think about that. Also, the solution that worked for you may not work for the other person. So don't rush and just offer a solution that works for you. Listen more. What is your current emotional state? Are you stressed, tired, or anxious? And of course, this applies to all of us right now. I think all of us are stressed, tired, and anxious to some extent. So I'm not saying that when you're stressed, tired, or anxious, you can't help anyone. What I'm saying is if you're not aware that you're stressed, tired, or anxious, that's going to affect your ability to help someone. But when you're about to talk to someone, ask yourself, what is my current emotional state? Another thing is, what do you want to get out of this interaction? What do you want to get out of this interaction? And sometimes, my brothers and sisters, when we're talking with someone, we want something which is introducing a bias, and which means we're not free to let that person get to the best place that they can possibly get, because we're really trying to achieve our own objective. And that's what I want you to be aware of. Do you want, for example, do you want to be credited for solving the problem? Like, so sometimes, hey, I want to be the person, I want to be the guy who helped that person, and I want to get that credit. Or I want a specific outcome. And I'll give you, even as a Christian, sometimes we want, in that conversation, for that person to say, oh yes, I believe in God. God is the answer to all my problems. We want them to say that. But we know, even in our own lives, it takes time to get there, right? It's not like someone is going to have this major realization. The likelihood of that happening is very low, we hope. But so we can't just like bombard people with the outcomes that we want for them. We have to be patient and support them in letting them discover what is best for them. What don't you know? Like what information don't you have? I want you to know that. What knowledge, what skills don't you have? And you have to be aware of that and seek it. And lastly, what other resources that are available, what are other resources that are available to or needed for this person? These are things that you have to ask yourself. So step one, we said, was to, let me just come back to that slide just to see step one, is get in touch with yourself. And I showed you 5 ways to get in touch with yourself so that you can support other people. Now I want to tell you how to support other people, okay? I want to tell you how to do that, okay? And this is, I want you to focus on these because these are skills. And what I love about skills is skills are something you can learn. It's kind of like learning how to ride a bike. It's learning how to ride a bike. These are skills that anyone can learn. It doesn't matter what your personality is. Anybody can learn how to do these things. All right, so, and I'm going to call these intermediate skills because I'm going to talk, these are much more advanced than like making eye contact and smiling and having open body language. Those are the basic skills, okay? I'm going to talk to you about some intermediate skills, okay? So, move into and sit in the pain. Move into and sit in the pain. What I mean by that is when someone is expressing to you a difficult thing, don't follow that natural gut reaction to pull away from it. I want to give you an example. One time I was at work and someone had come back from a trip that she was there on her trip for a few weeks. And I was passing through the hallway and going to the bathroom. And I saw her in the hallway and I said, hey, welcome back, we missed you. How was your vacation? And I was just smiling and I was walking while I was saying it, and I was planning to have like a 5-second interaction, right? And then she said, oh, my father passed away and I went to see him for the funeral. And I wasn't ready for that, right? I wasn't ready for that. Thank God I had some preparation and I knew this skill before that conversation happened, because I was able to quickly change my face, quickly just stop, slow down, try to like embrace what had happened in her life and say, oh, I'm so sorry. Like that's so sad. I can't believe that happened. I'm so far away from home. And then she started talking, and before we knew it, she was crying. She was telling me all these things about what happened and her dad, and she couldn't be there in time to say bye because of COVID, and it was a very, very difficult situation. But the point here that I want all of you to do, it's not, I didn't do anything that only I can do. I want all of you to do it, is whenever you see pain, move towards it, lean into it. Okay, be there. Like, don't pull away from it. Okay. All right. Next is slow down and focus as much as you can. Slow down. Slow the conversation down. Stop trying to have conversations about serious topics in 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Slow down. Okay. And just tell yourself in your mind, this is going to take 30 minutes. This is going to take 45 minutes. And I'm going to be here for that. And focus, listen, focus. Be careful with distractions, of course, right? That's an obvious one. Be careful with distractions, but listen to the person, listen to the words they're saying, follow them. Like, it's almost like they're taking a step and you're taking the step right behind them. It's like they're walking and you're putting your feet in their footprints and walking right behind them. In counseling, we call it tracking, right? But just track the person. And what are they saying? What are they going through? And all that stuff. Be focused, okay? Don't lose focus. Number 3 is such an easy one, is ask at least 5 questions. I really put that there. That's kind of like the baseline minimum. Really ask like 10 questions over the conversation, but start with asking 5 questions. Ask questions. Don't give advice. Please don't give advice. I can tell you this as someone who has worked with so many people that I have no idea what's going on. Okay, I have no idea what's going on. It's not because I've never seen it before, but because what's happening with that person is their experience. There's definitely details that that I don't know until they tell me. Right? You will always be a student of the other person. They will always have something to teach you. They will always have something to explain to you. Don't assume anything. Ask questions. Always ask questions. Okay. And let me just say that. Ask questions, don't give advice. I just want to make sure that's so important. All right. Now, number 4 is remember that each person's experience is true for them. Each person's experience is true for them. It might not be true in the absolute true way, but in that moment, until they believe something else, that is true for them. And so, like, we don't want to get into this discussion or this kind of like discourse or cycle or dynamic where we're arguing with someone about they shouldn't see something that way. And by the way, in relationships, this happens all the time. Like when communication breaks down, somebody raises a point and the other person says, "Oh, that's no big deal," or "That doesn't make any sense," or "Why would you say that?" And then communication just collapses. It's kind of just a building, like a house of cards. It just falls, right? So you have to remember that when someone is dealing with something, that's true for them. If they feel like life is over, for them at that time, they feel like life is over. And you have to be there with them and sit in the pain and focus and slow down and ask questions. Doesn't that sound so easy now? I just gave you this formula. Somebody says, "Hey, my life is over." Oh, okay. So what do you do when somebody says that? Move into and sit into the pain. Lean in, okay? Slow down, focus, ask questions. What are some questions you can ask? "Oh, that sucks. Like, what's making you say that?" That's a nice question, right? What's making you say that? And they're going to talk about it. And then empathy again, like, oh, so you're going to be there. It's a long conversation, right? And now you know what to do. And that's true for them. Please don't say, "Oh, no, your life's not over. Of course, you're living right now. I can see you. Aren't you breathing? Of course, your life's not over," right? Don't say that. That's not good, right? And if someone says that, you should probably try to ask, if they've made any attempts to take their life, and if they've in the past or now, are they thinking about ending their lives? And please don't. I should say this right now, and I was planning to say it later, but I'll say it now, which is if someone is talking about like ending their life or any sort of danger, don't be afraid to ask about it directly. You should ask about it directly. Like, are you thinking of ending your life? And then you could say, have you taken any steps to end your life? How would you do it if you because you want to know if they've planned it out, right? And then if you're finding that this is pretty they're pretty serious about this, do not leave them. Like, get them to help. Okay, like, I'm not saying that you can help them, but you could at least get them to help somehow. Okay. And if you're unsure what to do, you can talk to someone, right? You can talk to someone about what you heard with that person. Lastly is remember each person in each situation has a different level of readiness and timeline for change. And that's really important because not everyone is able, like, you might see the path that person needs to go through to get to where they need to be, but there's different stages of change, and not everyone is ready to go through all those stages right away. So that's why you might talk with someone and you feel like they're not ready to change. Yes, some people are not ready to change, and that's okay. Like, we're trying to support them and be there for them so that when they are ready, they have a place to go. All of this stuff is in addition to the commonly known listening skills and things that we've discussed that you guys, I'm sure you all know about as adults, of course, and like advanced professionals. That body language, eye contact, empathy, paraphrasing, things like that. So before I have this slide, and then I just want to tell you two things about COVID and getting help from a professional. But I want to summarize this stuff. So the first step, the first section was becoming in touch with yourself. How much of your life experience is clouding your ability to understand? What's your current emotional state? What do you want to get out of the interaction? What don't you know, and what resources are available? And then in terms of new skills that you're going to have, which I think you all have these skills now, is moving into and sitting in the pain. Slow down and focus as much as you can. Ask 5 questions at least. Remember that person's experience is true for them. And remember, each person in each situation has a different level and readiness and timeline for change, okay? Now, some special COVID considerations, because what I just said applies to everything all the time, but I want to give you some special COVID considerations. One, accept that each person is entitled to see risk differently. And what I said before is that the same set of data and information doesn't lead for each person the same set of decisions and behaviors and conclusions. And we see this all the time. Like, there are people right now who are not leaving home. There are people who are out partying. So same information is out there, right? So we don't want to assume that everyone's seeing risk differently. Sometimes you and another person are exactly the same in everything, except that that other person has someone who's immunocompromised or someone elderly in their life. And so they just are dealing with this differently. That's just life. You don't have to agree with another person's risk assessment in order to be supportive. This is where empathy is important. Just be empathic. Try to be in their shoes. It's true for them. Their risk assessment is their risk assessment. I'm not telling you what mine is, by the way, because I don't want you to use that as a reference point. And that's not the point, right? What I'm trying to tell you is that it's hard to support someone who has a different risk assessment than yours, okay? Don't challenge their perception of risk unless you feel like they are really, really open for it to be challenged. And that's not common, okay? Don't assume that your desire to talk about COVID is the same as the other person's. Some people don't want to talk about it anymore. And some people, that's what they want to talk about. So, but the point is, don't assume that your desire is the same as their desire. Maybe you don't want to talk about it, but they need to talk about it because it's really affecting them. And you're their only friend. The physical risks around COVID are one thing, and the emotional effects are another. Someone could be physically safe, but they could be alone, they could be anxious, they could be depressed, they could be going through a lot, even if they're physically okay. Be prepared for the other person to need to have a more serious conversation with you. Also, you need care too. Connect with supportive and encouraging people almost every day. And I just want to say that again. Even if you feel like it's not making a difference or you don't need it, blah, 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 do it. Just do it. Just do it. Find supportive and encouraging people every single day and connect with them, even if it's for 10 or 15 minutes. Because what could end up happening for some people is you could be home, not connecting with anyone, and that's it for days on at a time. And your soul or your mind is going through challenges and it's piling up and you don't even realize it until you find yourself really down and in need of a lot of support. So connect with people every day. You can say, I need to talk. I am not doing too well. Just say those phrases if you need help, say it. And know the resources around you and thank the community and professionals. The last thing I wanted to say before we open it up for questions is the 5 Ds. The 5 Ds are the Ds themselves, not the bullet points under them. These themselves come from a good friend of mine named Dr. Mina Merham, who's a psychiatrist. He's really awesome, and I love serving with him. I love him very much. And he helped to create this kind of like a list to help you think about, when do I need to seek a higher level of care? And the 5 Ds are duty, danger, duration, daily, and depth, to help you remember them. Duty is it affecting your ability to carry out your responsibilities in your daily life? Like, are you finding yourself not able to work, not able to do your assignments, not able to like meet commitments that you had? Danger, is there any danger to you or to someone else? Has the issue lasted for 4 weeks? That's duration. Frequency or daily. How frequently is this happening? Is it happening every single day, every 2 days, every 3 days? And depth, like how like deeply is this bothering you? Because sometimes you have like a anxious thought, but it doesn't stick, or it doesn't come that often. So, but if it's there and you can't stop thinking about it, it's becoming compulsive, then that's an issue. So that concludes the prepared material I had, and we'll open it up for questions for about 15 minutes or so.
Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you. I hope I didn't bombard you with too much.
It's a little bit much, but you know what? It's good to hear it regardless.
Okay, good. Yeah, so this I believe is being recorded, so you could always review again if there was something that you kind of zoned out if I gave too much. So you could always listen again.
Makar, thank you so much. That was full of super, super important information, especially now. And I encourage everybody, if you're shy, you don't want to ask questions just directly like on Zoom, you can send Makar a direct message on Zoom as well, and that'll be anonymous. But please, this is our chance to ask a professional counselor who's been doing this for so long now.
Okay, there's a question coming in from an anonymous person. I'm excited. The question itself hasn't come in yet, so the suspense is suspense is very high. I see that someone wants to ask a question, but so feel free to, by the way, direct message me on the chat. I'm going to know who you are, but I won't say your name, and I'll do my best to answer. All right, so the first question here: how do you suppose someone going through the exact same issue you are going through? Oh, how do you support someone going through the exact same issue you are going through, someone you care deeply about? Yeah, so I want to maybe kind of reiterate some of the points that we discussed, but maybe just in a different packaging, which is you being there for them means so much. Means so much, you being there for them. So, and I want to tell you, like I've been serving for a number of years, and sometimes, and anyone who has been will say the same thing, by the way. So it's not just me, but that sometimes conversations that you have with people, they don't feel like they're going, like they're productive, but they're not like going anywhere. You're just kind of like, they kind of feel like small talk. Or sometimes you do a visitation, if you in the times when we were visiting people, like our Sunday school kid or something like that, or you're calling people that to say hi. Those conversations don't feel very productive. Sometimes you're just like, what was the point of that? I just called to say hi, or I just visited someone and they weren't even paying attention or whatever. But that rapport means so much. The rapport means so much. Having that connection and that open line and that connection means so much to that person. And that person will feel like somebody cares. Somebody is here. I am worth it, right? And those things are the difference between suicide and not suicide, by the way, if we're going to talk about something as extreme as suicide. But someone cares about me. I am worth it. There is someone here for me. Those statements that's the difference between life and death for many people, right? So the first point I'm trying to make here is be there for them. Just ask about them, check in, how are you doing, whatever. All that stuff is good, even if it doesn't feel very productive, even if it doesn't feel like you're solving the problem. Then what you can do is you could share your own experience. You could share your own experience, or you could ask about their experience and talk about it. You can just talk about it. And that's going to add another component to this, which is shared experience. So sometimes just knowing that someone else is dealing with what I'm dealing with, you're like, wow, okay, I am a lot more normal and I am seeing someone else going through life. Maybe I can do it too. And all of this, by the way, is without solving the problem. So in all of this that I just said, none of this involves solving the problem. because a lot of times you can't solve the problem yourself. And then, of course, I would say pray for the person and see if you can get them to other resources. So I hope that helps. And if you feel, the person who asked this question, if you feel like what I said is not enough, you can ask like a more specific question or ask me to touch on a specific point, or tell me what obstacle you feel you're facing or why you think what I'm saying won't work, because maybe there's an exception that I haven't addressed. Because what I said is more of like a one-size-fits-all type of answer. Okay, there's another question. What are some tips that you can offer in interacting with a close relative of yours who is full of anger and resentment, and this person often raises his or her voice when speaking to you or other people? Thank you for asking that question. Thank you for asking that question. So first I want to say that God is not expecting you to take any abuse. I just want to say that first. God is not expecting you or asking you to take abuse like 99.5% of the time. Sometimes God gives a person a specific calling to endure abuse, but that's only like 0.5% of the time. Like even if you're married, I'm going to tell you, God doesn't want you to take abuse, right? Like from your spouse. So most of the time, if someone is yelling at you or treating you in an abusive way, or cursing at you or hitting you, that is, we need to intervene, okay? And I want to make that point clear. The church is not asking you to take abuse, okay? Now, let's move on to the next part of this, which is, what do you do when a close relative of yours is full of anger and resentment and they raise their voice when they're speaking? So, what you can do is you can like speak calmly and let them express themselves and stop trying to change them. Usually when someone raises their voice, it's because they feel like they're being constrained or they're not being understood. And what you can do is calmly pull out from them what they want to say, right? And like listen to them, let them say. And let a conversation with someone who's kind of like hot-tempered like that, let a conversation with them be spread out over multiple conversations, okay? So what I mean by that is because that person, like they get flooded with emotion, usually like a person who's hot-tempered, usually they're flooded with emotion and they don't know how to manage their emotions. So if you are trying to have like a productive conversation, they're so flooded they can't get through that whole conversation. So what you have to do is break it up into pieces, right? And so break it up into really, really small pieces. Like for example, like ask them what's going on and empathize with them, and then just go away. Just end the conversation in a nice way and not in an abrupt way, and keep going. And then next time you can bring it up again, but now you're starting at another level and your relationship is stronger and they feel more understood. And always speak calmly. If you lose your ability to speak calmly, then you are part of the problem, and don't do that. I want to add one more thing where there's a little skill here, and this you may or not be able to do this, but because it's a little advanced, of thoughtful interruptions to prevent things from escalating. So thoughtful interruptions to prevent things from escalating. Because what ends up happening is once someone gets to the point where they're raising their voice and they're full of anger, it's going to take probably hours for physiologically, it's going to take hours for their body to calm down, right? Like their body has switched into this mode, their heart is racing, they're sweating, all this stuff is going on. So it's going to take hours, like they can't even do it with their mind. Their body needs to calm down. So there is value in preventing things from escalating. And you can do that by some thoughtful interruptions. So like, for example, if you sense they're about to start yelling, you can say, okay, just 1 second, like before we start yelling, or let me ask you a question to help my understanding, like put it back on you, right? Or whatever it is. But think of ways that you can interrupt, not in a offensive way, but just in a way to prevent things from escalating. Because the moment things escalate too much, you need hours after that to just calm down to move forward. I hope this is helpful. Thank you. And thank you for your question. That was a really good question. Okay, so are there any other questions or comments or concerns or disagreements?
I'm also going to check. We are live on YouTube, so I'm just going to check if there are any questions there.
Okay, well, your audio was very low, but I did hear what you said. So,
sorry.
Okay, yeah, no, I got it. You'll check on YouTube. While we're seeing what's on YouTube, I saw another question came in. How can different socioeconomic statuses between a couple be managed and not deter it from destroying a relationship? That's a really good question. It's more couple related and not COVID related. The important question is, it's going to be two parts. One is, what does money mean to each partner, and what does income mean to each partner? That's going to be one question. And this matters for both, for the one that's the higher socioeconomic status and for the one that's the lower socioeconomic status. Because both of them, if they don't view money and income in a healthy and balanced way, they can create like a pretty stubborn wedge in the relationship. So the way we should view money is one way of providing, right? It's one way of providing. It's not the only way of providing, because we also need to provide for each other emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, physically, right? And so providing financially is one way. It's possible that one person is providing for their family financially and the other person is providing emotionally, or they provide, I'll give you a good example. Like, I know a couple where the wife makes a lot of money, but the husband is really, really good at managing the money. And so, and when in working with this couple, based on what I'm seeing with them and what they've explained and the problems that they face and what's going on, if the wife was left to her own decisions, she would have lost lots and lots of money. Like, and not because of foolish decisions necessarily, but mainly because of ignorance. Like, I'm not saying that in a critical way. I just mean, like, she doesn't have the financial savvy to manage the money well, as compared to her husband, who has a lot of skills and experience in this area. So it's almost like she brought in all this money, and the value he added was preventing them from losing all that money. So that's like such a big thing that he's bringing into that relationship. And also, some of his decisions have made money for them as a couple. So that's the first part. And the second part is going to have to do with the amount of respect in the relationship, which is really important. You know, especially at least the common, I'm going to say the common scenario, but if you want me to talk about an exception, I can do that too. But the common scenario where couples get stuck is if the wife makes much more money than the husband. And so, which can or can't be a problem depending on first how you see money and how you see income. And the other thing too has to do with the way the executive role is shared in the marriage. So what that means is, how does the couple make decisions? For example, let's say the wife like manages people at work, and then when she comes home, she treats her husband as if she's managing him too. Right, so that's not going to be good, right? That's not going to be good, because once you get home, you're both equals. The same thing, and that would be a problem if the husband was the one making more money, and the husband was the one managing people at work and is treating his wife like she works for him. Like, that would be a problem too, right? So once a couple in this situation, if money is means, like, it's not a completely healthy understanding of money, if the respect isn't there, they're going to be extra sensitive if they're not respectful and making decisions together. I got another question through the chat, but I also want to see if there's any questions from YouTube first.
Mary, are there any questions from YouTube?
Okay. All right. So, okay, there's two more questions that came in. So is it okay if I continue for 11 more minutes? Does that work? Okay. All right. So The next question is, does mindfulness and meditation help in dealing with anxiety? Do they have negative impact on our spirituality since they are byproducts of New Age? Okay, so it's a really good question. Mindfulness and meditation are, if you look at them from a Christian perspective and apply them in a Christian way, they can be extremely valuable, extremely valuable. Like, of course, you know, if you look into the origins of these things, maybe you'll find some like bad origins, but that doesn't mean that the principle itself or the practice itself is bad, right? So what does this mean? Mindfulness is becoming more aware of the present, because anxiety is usually coming about fear in the future, about the unknown future, right? That's anxiety is, there's something in the future, I can't control it, or I don't know what it is, and I'm really worried about it. And then it becomes very obsessive and compulsive, those thoughts, and they become very automatic and they start to interfere with your life. So mindfulness, one of the main thing you do is you want to become in touch with the present, right? And there's a verse in the Bible that says, whatever thing is good, whatever thing is holy, whatever thing is, all these things, meditate on these things. That's what the Bible says, like meditate on good things, right? So think about the present, think about good things, focus on those things, okay? And when you're practicing mindfulness or meditation, just be really careful not to let your mind go off into meditation or focus on the thing you're anxious about, right? Because that's going to be counterproductive. And one of the things you can do to ensure that this is to help increase the likelihood that this is going to be a healthy process is pray for God to be present in your practice of mindfulness and meditation. Like, invite God into it. Say, God, please come into this process with me. I don't want you to forget that many of the church fathers, many of the monks, their meditation is on the Jesus prayer, right? Like they're saying, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy upon me, a sinner. And many of you have read the book, The Way of the Pilgrim, and it's not just him who says that, but that they say the Jesus prayer with every inhalation, every exhale, inhale, exhale, and they're saying the Jesus prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. So the point here is that meditation is not bad. Mindfulness is not bad if you practice it in a Christian way, and they can be great. And meditation and being in touch with the present is so important. And there's many verses about it, like where God said, "Be still and know that I am God," right? And where God was heard in the silence, in that story with Elijah, right? That you close the room on yourself and pray. Right, like you go up into your room and you close the door and you pray. All these things are all very much aligned with these very healthy practices if you practice them in a Christian way and invite God into them. I hope this helps. And again, if anybody has any like exceptions or obstacles to my answers or additions, please feel free to write them or add them. Next question I have here is, if you reach out to check in or follow up with someone after not having spoken for a while, what do you do and how many times do you reach out if they're not responding without being a bother? How do you balance or discern whether they need to talk versus perhaps being intrusive by continuing to check on them? Well, I would say if you don't know of a specific reason why they are not answering you, it's okay to keep trying, maybe once every 2 weeks. And that's fine. And also you can change how you're reaching out, maybe like with a text message, maybe one time with a phone call, and you can switch it up. And once every 2 weeks should be fine. You could also, if you are comfortable and if it makes sense to ask someone who knows if there might be an issue, you can ask around and see. And also you can, part of changing it up could also be you, instead of asking them for something, you can leave them with something, like with an encouraging message. You can say, hey, I really care about you. I've been thinking about you lately. I hope you're doing well. That's very different from saying, hey, how are you? How have things been? Right? So, and at least you didn't get something from them, but at least you were able to show them where you stand. But I think unless they've told you that they're upset with you or something, which is a different kind of situation, I think, you know, once every 2 weeks is totally fine. That's my opinion. The next question I have here is, how do you avoid comparing similar situations from your past to your present? Using the example you mentioned of this relationship or person reminds me of X, so I got to get out of it ASAP. How do we stop comparing people to our past traumas? Well, it's going to be a combination of two things. One is processing the past trauma, and number two is being very intentional about this person is not who that prior person was, right? So let me just explain what I mean by those two things. One is, in terms of getting through your trauma, usually this needs professional help, but there are books out there that you could read that could guide you through the process as well, or give you so much insight that you end up like kind of bouncing or growing through it by having all this insight and awareness. So what that means is, if you've experienced trauma, you were hurt, and you need to get to a point where you forgive that person. It doesn't mean you need to reconcile with that person if they're still unsafe or if you don't feel ready, but it means that you need to forgive them. That's an internal process. That's not something you have to do with them. You don't need to tell them, I forgive you. But in your heart, you need to forgive them. That's not something to be rushed. And the steps that happen before that are painful, because you have to be specific about the offense that you experienced. You have to be specific about how it affected you. You have to articulate your anger towards that person, and you have to be clear about that. And you can do that through writing a letter, for example, to that person and not giving it to them. But you can say, hey, I really hate you for what you did to me. And I can't believe that you did this and you said that, and this is how it made me feel, and I trusted you and all of that. And then after you go through that difficult and painful process, you forgive the person. You say, I release you, I forgive you, I do not hold this against you anymore. It doesn't mean you have to go back to that person, because some people are still unsafe even if you've forgiven them, right? So that's what you need to do, right? Because if you don't forgive them, that's unresolved. So that's going to manifest itself in your next relationship. So that's why you need to resolve it. Now, how do you avoid making that connection when you're dealing with another person? Is also you can make a list of how that person is different from the person who caused the trauma. Literally make a list. You can make a list of how this person loves me, how this person cares about me. What are the indicators of this person caring about me? What are the indicators of them loving me? How is that person different? Literally write down the list of 10 to 20 things, and that list is going to help you, because once you articulate it for yourself, it becomes more tangible and real, and you're going to see that this person is not my mother, is not this, is not that. So I hope that helps. So I don't think we're going to have time for another question, but it was really a blessing to be among you guys. I love this so much, and you're such an awesome group, and you ask such great questions. So that by itself makes me encouraged, and it says a lot about you guys. So thank you so much for participating.
Makar, thank you so much for making the time to be with us. I know you're extremely busy, and your help is needed by many people right now. So we really, really appreciate your time and just your presence and your expertise. And we're so grateful that you've been with us and you've been able to answer these questions so well. Just wondering, would you mind putting in your contact information in the chat for people in case they want to get a hold of you after?
Sure. I'll send it over right now. So make sure you get it. And Teresa also has my email address. So feel free to share this email address. Yeah.
Amazing. Also, do you mind just sharing on your screen? I'll take a screenshot and keep it on. The two questions, actually, just because I'm having tech issues at the moment, of the two discussion questions that you mentioned.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'll send those over.
So Makar has graciously kind of given us a couple of really great, insightful questions that we can discuss in small groups that should kind of help us think about things a little bit more individually and as a group too. And this has been really, really helpful, I think, for a lot of us.
I am sending them right now.
Thank you, Makar. I'm so sorry. I've had too many challenges this evening with
Oh,
Zoom.
that's okay. That's okay.
Amazing.
All right. Well,